Welcome to the Wharton Global Youth Meetup Live Alumni Career Chat. I'm Diana Drake, Managing Editor with the Wharton Global Youth Program. As part of our ongoing series of conversations with Wharton graduates this summer, today we're talking with Wharton MBA Ahmad Thomas, who is CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Silicon Valley is, of course, the Northern California region that is a hub for technology entrepreneurs, startups, and innovation. Prior to joining SVLG, Ahmad worked as an investment banker at Barclays, where he specialized in structuring and financing public infrastructure, social impact, development projects across multiple sectors. As a lead banker on several innovative transactions, he most notably executed the first ever social bonds issue for a nonprofit in the U.S. municipal bond market. Prior to Barclays, he served as a senior aide to U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein in Washington, D.C., as an advisor on finance and economic policy. Ahmad, thank you for joining our Gym Career Chat.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Diana. I love it. You come to Wharton, they lead with the banker piece. So many of these conversations, they'll usually take the other side and say, he's done this in the public sector. But Wharton, they say, investment banker right at the top. I like that.
Yeah, we've got a lot of aspiring investment bankers in our midst. So.
Great.
But that being said, I really want to start with your latest challenge. So can you tell us a little bit about the mission and the purpose of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group?
Well, sure. Silicon Valley Leadership Group, we're over 40 years old. We were founded by David Packard, co-founder of Hewlett-Packard, one of the largest, most influential business associations in the country, certainly in Silicon Valley and California. And we started as a group of the biggest companies at the time in Silicon Valley. It was about 30 who got together and said, we can make this community a better place. We can be a bridge between community investment, between government leaders, between our employees working collectively on behalf of the region. And you fast forward to where we are today. We've got almost 400 member companies, virtually every major employer in Silicon Valley. And we work to try and make the valley and the country and, frankly, when we talk about technology, make the world a better place.
Interesting. So you actually became CEO of the group a year ago during the heart of the pandemic. And I read that you are charged with leading Silicon Valley Leadership Group in urgent action to address racial justice, equity, and opportunity with its 400 or so companies that are members. So have the issues unfolding during the pandemic taken their toll on Silicon Valley companies? And can you go into more detail about the nature of that work in particular?
Yeah, and I think when we talk about MBAs and learning about organizational design and structure, it's a whole nother conversation. But taking this job as CEO in the middle of a pandemic brought along its own set of organizational management and design challenges. Probably even more significant than I anticipated. So a lot of time over the last 11 months for me has been spent internally, building the systems and the infrastructure to really work well in a remote environment, breaking down silos, really making us as efficient and as effective as possible. When we talk to the broader vision issues, me leaving the private sector, leaving investment banking to come here, at its core really does lie with the diversity challenges we see in Silicon Valley. And my thesis is, thankfully backed by our board and so many of our executives in Silicon Valley, is that if companies of this caliber can take concrete actions to diversify their leadership, diversify their workforce, be great corporate citizens that create shared value for us all, if that can happen in Silicon Valley, that type of change can be catalyzed across the country. So we have very open and direct conversations about racial justice, about equity, about, frankly, having more diversity at the top in Silicon Valley. We've got a number of programs. The signature initiative is called 25 by 25, where our companies are either making direct investments or direct commitments around DEI. It's all very exciting stuff.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're already feeling as though progress is being made in the Silicon Valley in these areas.
Well, I think so. I've been pleasantly surprised. Look, I've got my own set of lived experiences. I was skeptical isn't the right word. I live in Silicon Valley, and I've got a lot of faith in our business community. I've been a member of the business community. But I think to see the level of authenticity, at least from the folks that I deal with, about trying to catalyze change and be an example in terms of corporate leadership, I've been very surprised by that. Frankly, the issue for us is not having the resources to keep up with demand. You know, we've had to staff up, we've had to bring on people who can build websites and other things because we have a lot of interest in the diversity and equity work that we're doing, and we just need to ensure we've got the resources aligned to be able to deliver upon those expectations. So I think that Silicon Valley, without a question, is moving in the right direction. But you know, I sit with a lot of execs. I don't see many that look like me. Often I go days sitting in rooms with not a lot of black leaders, not a lot of leaders of color, not enough women at the top, and that is a compounding effect. That's why 25 by 25, that initiative, is a math problem. And the point is that as you bring in more leaders of color, you have a compounding change maybe in terms of hiring and also changes in terms of decisions and I think making our businesses more competitive. But the point is that one change at the top or C-suite has a cascading effect that can be very positive.
So you've had such an interesting and varied career. How would you describe your unique set of skills?
Well, I'll tell you, I always try and seek, and these are Wharton trained lessons, try and seek where I can differentiate myself and where I see a real competitive advantage in a skill set that I bring, or a product that I'm bringing to market, or a transaction we're looking to close, or a deal you're trying to win. To me, if you cannot crystallize or clearly communicate where your competitive advantage is in the market, you're not where you need to be. For me, oftentimes these jobs are held by elected officials or great policy professionals, community affairs leaders. They're all wonderful folks, but that's a very different skill set than what I've brought. And my experience has been working at the highest levels of government, and I've just been fortunate to get great mentorship. Senator Feinstein, our senior senator, former mayor of San Francisco, was someone who worked with me at a young age and taught me so much. And then transitioning away to investment banking, transitioning to Wharton, I also have an analytical, I think, view of how to operationalize change. And that's where I see my experience and skill set, coupled with a set of lived experiences, as being very unique and, I think very value added. It's unfortunate that it's unique from a diversity standpoint, but from a skill set standpoint, I try to use these differences as ways to kind of catapult our team and the change we're trying to lead. My personal story, I'm a small town guy from California, Lompoc, California, a military family, and my dad's a Vietnam vet. My dad's born and raised in the segregated South. I wrote an article I'm extremely proud of about my family's story that's in the current Wharton magazine. It's called A Seat at the Table. And it talks about my dad's first visit to Wharton and Penn in the middle of Jim Crow down in Alabama. And my mother's West Indian from the Caribbean. My mom's from Trinidad and Tobago. And she has her set of experiences as an immigrant. And so, I hope when we talk about things that are different about me and for the folks on the line where you think about what your competitive advantages are, my lived experiences are unique. And rather than seeing them as a hindrance or rather than maybe viewing myself as, man, I'm the only one in the room who's whatever it might be for that room, I try to see it as a competitive advantage.
Did it take you a while to get to that mindset, though? When you were first starting out in your career, did you see yourself as the only one in the room or as different? And then ultimately you began to see that as a true strength.
Yeah. Shelley Archambault, another Wharton grad who was a former member of our board at SVLG, she's written her great book recently that really has a decent amount on imposter syndrome that she writes about. And my wife and I have chatted a lot about this. for whatever reason, my issues are on the other side. My issues are kind of delusions of grandeur. I'm a real dreamer.
Right.
Uh, Again, I don't know why. My wife's a doctor; she could probably psychoanalyze me more. But I've I've um, I've never. I think I probably have experienced different challenges, but not that challenge about do I belong here. I've also been very fortunate because I had a lot of training under fire. So working on Capitol Hill straight out of grad school, I've been to the White House and sitting with the vice president, who's now our current president, President Biden, making a presentation to him on very short notice, right? Or presenting to CEOs day after day. And so the point is not any great skill, but like Malcolm Gladwell and others talk about, if you get the reps in, or if you're fortunate to put yourself in that position, you build confidence around what you bring to the table. So by the time I've sat in this job, I've presented to executives thousands of times, right? So I've been able to build those muscles. I was probably pretty bad at it at first, and I'm still trying to get better. But I've been fortunate to build up, I think, from a young age. I'm fortunate to have been put in positions that have allowed me to build that more innate confidence, I guess.
Yeah, that's very valuable insight, especially for our audience today. All right, so I waited a couple questions in, but now I have to pivot to investment banking for a minute because I know we have lots of aspiring investment bankers out there. So you spent a decade, right, as an investment banker. What were your day-to-day responsibilities at Barclays? Can you talk a little bit about just the shape of your job?
Sure. So all my deals were infrastructure deals in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a straight municipal tax-exempt debt, whether that be some really interesting corporate real estate taxable transactions that I led, or whether it be, some very large transactions we did, for example, for the state of California. So over that decade, I senior managed 15 billion worth of deals, and started out, going through the associate training program in New York and really building and honing that analytical skill set, which is so critically important. Not so much, I can't push the right buttons in Excel anymore, although I'd hope I'm better than the average guy in the street, but I can't do that to the level I used to. But I can look at a set of financials, or I can look at a relevant report and see where the numbers aren't what they should be, right? So what started as associate work, ultimately came to me leading our state of California coverage in the public sector. And then finally, before I took this job, all of this social impact work we did for public sector clients in the Western region, I led.
And help us understand executing the first ever social bond issue for a nonprofit in the U.S. municipal bond market. These bonds were issued on behalf of Health Right 360, I believe. How did that transpire, and what exactly does it mean?
Yeah, that was a hard deal, but it turned out to be a real success, and ultimately what was most important is success for the client. That was a situation where this nonprofit entity that did incredible work in the community, actually across California, serving 40,000 real high-risk patients, homeless, deep drug addiction. They really deal with serious issues. And their CEO, her name is Vitka Eisen, was a former IV drug user herself and a client of Health Right 360 years ago. She got help. She went off to Harvard and got her PhD, and she's amazing. I actually sit on their board of directors now. They needed to access capital markets and do so in a non-recourse fashion. They needed to find a way that they could tap in to some of these institutional investors that would not normally look at probably a debt instrument like this. And we were able to actually quantify and really demonstrate on the roadshow the social metrics behind their day-to-day mission and align that and match that with ESG funds, large institutions that set that as criteria for their investment. So the long and short of it, the high point is an entity that had been in technical default a year earlier that had a lot of challenges, as nonprofits have financially, through no fault of their own or through their output and product, came to market with this social bond, and at pricing it was 10 times oversubscribed. So we literally had almost 10 times more investors than bonds to sell, which allowed us to tighten yields and make it an even better transaction for them. And I think that's helped to begin to set a market standard. We saw a $1 billion deal from the Ford Foundation, others that have come to market since. But there's a real, I think, yearning for more private capital to fund social impact projects.
Interesting. So I've heard you allude to a few, yeah, I've heard you allude to a few colleagues whom you've met along your journey in your career. And I'm just wondering what you might say about the power of relationships in business, because you've been in a very relational type of role in a lot of different places. And, can you talk a little bit about how meeting people, but also maintaining relationships has been important to the advancement of your career and also just to your own success?
The networking, I think, is critically important. Being able to network authentically, I would posit, is even more important. So you get a lot of people that are great, at managing their networks and all the cultivation things. I mean, I feel like Stu Friedman at Wharton, he's one of my favorite professors. He wrote the Total Leadership book. He talks about that authenticity around your leadership. But for me, what I found is being myself and really authentically building these relationships has been critically helpful to my my growth and opportunities throughout my life. As I said, I'm a small town guy. I'm from a military family. I don't have some hard scrabble story, but I definitely was someone who would not be sitting in this position if it were not for the mentors I've had who are able to speak to the output and quality of work I was able to do in whatever position I was in. So part of it is finding yourself in the right position. Part of it is authentically nurturing and maintaining your relationships. But ultimately, the networking only gets you so far. You've got to be able to produce and deliver. And if you can find that right match, I like to say luck is where preparation meets opportunity. You find that right match and you've got a powerful network of people who know that you're a producer, the sky's the limit, at least in my opinion.
So I want to encourage our viewers to drop your questions in the Q&A channel, and we'll be getting to them in a few minutes. So hopefully we'll hear from a bunch of you. So your time as a senior aide to Senator Feinstein helped you understand the crucial nature of public-private partnerships and the intersection of policy and innovation that drives Silicon Valley. I want to understand that better. So those 2 points in particular, how did you develop this expertise, and how would you kind of describe the nuances of both the kind of public-private partnership as well as this intersection of innovation and policy?
To me, if I were to distill the core lessons from government, maybe, and taking them to what I do here today, obviously impact drives everything. And there's a reason why those folks are working as hard as they do for the pay that they get, because everyone is there because there's something inside of them that really motivates them to be there. In addition to impact, I was fortunate to be in a situation, or if you take Senator Feinstein, where that office had a private sector mentality, and it was run like a business, in that there's products, there's deadlines, and there is no way around coming up with a solution. And I find now, as I'm, authentically in the nonprofit sector, I guess for the first time in my life, you get a lot of spinning around and philosophizing and 4-hour meetings and all this stuff, which has a point and is important. I don't mean to demean it, even though you hear the disdain in my voice. But I came up with people who viewed government through the lens of really meeting strict metrics. If you took the way that office worked in the Senate, we would have a list of bills that you'd be tracking every week. And if you didn't have progress that you were making to make that bill a law, that wasn't a spot that you wanted to be in. And, I think it's trying to take more of this mindset of operationalizing change to the fore, as opposed to just the same old. You often in these positions, or often in the policy world, you have a lot of people that have done things the same way for many, many years. And I guess I would say there's a real opportunity to be more entrepreneurial in how we view public policy, bring more of a business mindset to how we tackle a lot of these problems, and frankly, have a mindset of creating shared economic value, where corporations acting well is not viewed as welfare. It's viewed as a great investment because it makes said company more profitable.
Let's talk about Wharton for a minute. So you went to Cornell actually for undergrad, and then on the London School of Economics and Political Science for your master's, and then later earned your MBA from Wharton. What prompted you to head to business school later in your career? And also, do you have a favorite memory or story from your time at Wharton?
Well, I would start maybe with that last question. So, you talk about networking. So much of business school is the networking. For two memories, here's a great full circle story. So I did one of the Wharton Ventures, where with the National Outdoor Leadership School, we went out to Alaska and we did a partial glacier crossing, right? We had Special Forces military folks with us and great National Outdoor Leadership School instructors. And the Wharton students I was with, I really got to know them extremely well. So it would be that, and along with Stu Friedland's class and the coaches that I still keep from that class. Those would be two of my favorite experiences. And now I just joined the board of the National Outdoor Leadership School, which is kind of bringing it all full circle. And they do amazing work with Wharton and many, many great business schools. For me, I had originally thought I would go to law school. I was interested in policy. I was interested in business. And it's like, okay, you go to law school. I never wanted to practice law per se, but I figured that would be the route. I had a internship at a great law firm when I was in college. And while it was a really good experience, it showed me that I didn't want to be a lawyer. These guys were reading contracts all night long, and just not my forte.
Yeah, internships are funny that way. They teach us what we don't want to do too, right?
Right. So that had extreme value for me, right? Showing me what I didn't want to do. And then I began thinking about, business school or what I might do next. So grad school is public policy. I had wanted to spend time overseas, and I was very interested in kind of economics as well. When I was working on the Hill, my wife was in med school at Georgetown. My plan was to go to business school shortly thereafter. She ended up matching to come back home to California. So the delay was nothing other than it being put off due to family and life and landing a great job. And I was able, fortunately, a little further down the line to come back to Wharton. I'd always wanted to be focused on a highly quantitative program, because part of self-reflection for me is trying to see where my deepest holes were. And as someone who was in that softer policy world, the one remaining hole would be analytics. And Wharton sure as heck can close that hole. That was one reason why Wharton in particular was so important to me.
Great. So what do you see as our greatest challenge around racial justice? I'm going to throw this one at you. And also, what is the critical role for Generation Z as they enter the workforce? We're talking to high school students today. A lot of them are very involved in the racial justice movement. So I'm just wondering, what you see as kind of the priorities moving forward.
Yeah, boy, that's a hard question. I'll tell you this. What keeps me up at night is that this opportunity is perishable. And those words come from the legendary venture capitalist Ken Coleman, who has been someone who's offered great guidance to me, and I was talking to him about this a few weeks ago. But the limited window of opportunity, we already see the conversations shifting. George Floyd was, for many people who have not come up in communities of color, was eye-opening. For many of us on the other side, it was not. It's a reality. It's obviously heartbreaking to see it so up close and personal, to watch someone lose their life so senselessly. But the fact that I see a window of opportunity closing here is what gives me the most pause and concern. So maybe in that vein, what I would tell high school students and younger folks is keep that window open. Keep that window open, whether that be having these conversations, whether that be engaging around these issues in a very well thought out manner, i.e., I want to achieve XYZ objectives. Essentially build a business plan. This is this notion to me of operationalizing change. One approach would be to do several things in a fashion that potentially wasn't as organized or structured as it could be. Another approach might be to say, I want to achieve XYZ, and build your business plan to operationalizing that change. Now, this is spoken as a Wharton MBA, so I don't sit here as a social theorist. Again, I have my own set of lived experiences that inform what I do, but that's the way I try to approach these challenges with my role as CEO at Silicon Valley Leadership Group. And what I would also say is try to be unapologetic about your views. If you see something that's not right, speak up. I've been in closed door conversations where I've seen tones that I don't like, and I say something about it. But I reflect and ask myself, would I have said something 10 years ago? And I don't know what the answer is, which is a little bit unsettling. Now, you sit here from a position of authority, and it's easy. There's no credit for doing that. For you all, it's hard. If you're the youngest person in the room, if you're in a relatively junior role, right, you're fresh out of high school or fresh out of college, and you hear your boss talking a certain way, this generation has got to be that generation that says, I don't like that. I don't like the way you made me feel. I don't like the way you talk about race or gender or whatever said topic might be. Those are some thoughts. I'm sorry I don't have anything profound about it, but that's how I think about these issues.
I think those are really important points. And again, it comes back to mindset, and how you feel walking into that room. And I think some intentional thought around that is really useful advice for people going into the workplace. So let's turn to a couple questions from our students. The first one is from Albert. To what extent do you think greater access to education can help bridge opportunity gaps between demographic groups? Do you think edutech will play a large role in closing this gap?
Albert, good question. So the first part is easy. I wouldn't be sitting here without education, and in particular, you can say it like it is, the name brands of the schools that I went to. Now, if I had a different family upbringing, or maybe even a different lived experience, these brands and network would not have mattered as much. But for me, maybe starting at a much lower base, that network multiplier effect was extremely meaningful. The Wharton, LSE, the work on the Hill, investment banking, all that stuff helps lift someone and equalize. When you talk about ed tech, you get, and that's a big topic, so I'll speak specifically about like open course access, Coursera, things like that. Okay. When you talk about that, you get to that exact question. So if you take me sitting off a military base a few years ago, could an open platform like that potentially have helped me get to a position like I have today? I don't know. That's a tough one. I think it can certainly help from a knowledge and skill set gap. But as you can hear from this conversation, there's a lot more to getting to where you want to be than just knowing the rote functions of said job. Albert, I hope that helps you out a little bit. That's those are some initial thoughts.
That was a good first question. Okay. Number two, Alexandra would like to know, in the current job market, how important do you think it is to hold an MBA? Do you think your career was greatly impacted by your time at Wharton?
Well, my career was no doubt greatly impacted by my time at Wharton because it helped give me a skill set that I was lacking, and it also helped refine a skill set that was critical to my performance. So that answers the value question. Now, it's a lot of money, so ultimately, in some respects, it can be a math problem for people to sit and really look at their foregone earnings or potential earnings potential and what all of that means, which I know is very individualized. For me, ironically, what I've gotten most out of Wharton has been related to leadership, organizational design, communication, maybe to a certain degree. It hasn't been finance. Now, I came in with a fair amount of that, which might be reflective in my answer here. But for a finance school, and yes, we are a finance school. I mean, I hope I'm not stepping on the branding. But for a finance school, the biggest learnings that have stuck with me have been the leadership and management learnings. An MBA, an MBA has value, sure. But I think the value, when you look at that cost-benefit analysis, is probably in line with, again, the multiplier impacts and where you are. I'll say if you want to be a CEO, or if you're really looking for how you can differentiate yourself in a very competitive market, so long as you're able to financially do so smartly, it's hard for me to see an MBA being a bad decision. Now, there's a difference between a Wharton MBA and a lot of other programs. So if you start getting into decisions over whether I go to this big name brand program versus this other program that might be way below said name brand in terms of brand value, and you're looking at paying the same amount for the program, I'd really ask myself a hard question about whether that made sense. But these big name programs that add a lot to your personal branding, it's hard for me to see that as being a bad choice.
I want to ask you a little bit more about this personal branding idea. So over the course of our conversation today, you've alluded to your lived experience several times, and but then we've also talked about your academic experience as well. And it just sounds to me like there's a lesson in there about kind of balancing those two in terms of how you approach decision making, problem solving, your career, your relationships with people. Would you agree with that? Having a balance between lived experience as well as the knowledge pieces, is important. But we've talked a lot about storytelling in business and how that's important. And I just feel that it's a message that needs to get out, is that it's not all about kind of the intellect, right? There's a lot of other things that go into what we do.
Yes, and you've said it far more eloquently than I could have. I've sprinkled around staccato trying to convey exactly what you just said, right? That article I wrote in the magazine, I would assert my dad has a better business mind than a lot of the Wharton grads of that time, understanding common sense, and you put the military training into it, really understanding how to motivate people and create team cohesion. I went to a lot of kids at a small town high school who could get things done probably better than many fancy MBAs that you run into, but just because they've got a nose for boiling down a problem and going with it. Now, that's the one piece of the issue. When we talk about these equity problems, it's very easy for a white dropout at Stanford to just keep rolling in life, step after step, with a lot of opportunities presented to him, if I were to stereotype, given that person's potential stature or given some of the strictures that we operate within here in Silicon Valley. If you take some small town woman of color who's got nothing but her lived experiences to try and crack into that market, you've got a different set of challenges to confront. So I think it's our job, it's incumbent upon me and if you look at our hires at SVLG, I'm incredibly proud of the diverse team that we've built. We go from top PhDs and lawyers to people who are doing really interesting stuff, and can add tremendous value to the team. I'm not caught up on, look, if you went to Wharton and you want to give me a call and you think there's a fit, let's have the conversation. But I don't get caught up necessarily on overvaluing academics versus lived experience. If I'm answering the question really bluntly, throughout my life, it's usually that rougher around the edges, lived experience individual who is more productive and better at doing whatever you need done than fancy smarty pants person.
Right. Okay, a few more questions.
I hope I'm both. I hope I've got that grit that's part of my lived experience, along with you guys cleaning me up at Wharton and finding what I've got, and I hope that comes into a package that's comes pretty hard.
Yes, definitely there's a balance there, and both of them are very important. So a couple more student questions. If you had to go back in time, would you change anything over in your career? Would you change anything that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot I could analyze in terms of steps. And it's interesting, Steve Jobs, if you haven't seen his commencement speech at Stanford years ago, you guys definitely check that out. He talks about this tapestry that was essentially woven from a bunch of different experiences that got him to where he was. And he could not be sitting where he was without that tapestry. I kind of feel like that. So it's hard to change pieces in that package because I wouldn't be the package without it. I would say, to answer the question at a higher level, I think I probably would have been well served when I saw that my head and heart and goals for impact may not have been completely fully aligned with the role that I had. It probably would have made sense to move away from those roles earlier. But you often think, whether it be for pay or prestige or title or promotion, sometimes you overthink your career jumps or career moves or even your internal moves. And I probably perseverated on some of that stuff too long in hindsight. Mm-hmm. That's one thought I'd share.
And what do you think was the detriment of that, or the disadvantage? Just that you were not using your heart and head fully, or what was?
It's lost opportunity, but it's about aversion to risk. And this is something I think a lot about. And I've got a few executives, Black and Latino, who are in my little sounding board group, and we talk about this. And too often our communities, whether it really be financial, you could be taking care of your family, your parents, extended relatives, whatever your situation is, or trying to take care of yourself in a really expensive city, whether it be trying to build your professional career, knowing that you don't have the safety net to fail that others might have. It creates an aversion to risk that's real. I'm not saying it's insignificant, but that risk aversion can cost you when you have to analyze an opportunity cost for staying or leaving or shifting your roles internally at your firm or at your org or whatever you're doing. And I think when I really analyze some of my career decisions, I probably was too risk averse, especially early on. But again, there are a lot of data points and factors that weigh into that risk aversion.
Okay, one more question. Do you think that big hedge funds and investment firms will divert more of their funds towards social projects and NGOs in the next 10 years?
Well, I think so.
Where's the money go?
Yeah, I think so, because it's the right thing to do. But again, we put our Wharton hat on. I think so because you can make a lot of money. And there's some yields that are very good. You see BlackRock and Larry Fink talk about this a lot. You have big endowments. I don't know where Wharton is exactly on it. I know that here at home with Stanford, they have a significant amount of investment allocated to these social projects and or prohibited from non-socially accretive work. right? So the reason why I think there's tremendous potential there, because there's a real opportunity for revenue. And one of my learnings over my humble career has been where there's revenue, there's usually a lot of smart people, right? Revenue seems to be the bottom line in so many of our life situations, even at nonprofits, even in public policy. And I think there's a lot of revenue and a lot of opportunity with ESG and impact.
All right, quickly, last question, I promise. Best advice for someone who's thinking about, or maybe they're challenged thinking about what career path they'd like to take. You know, what would be your best advice to Generation Z?
You got to do something you really care about. If you're going halfway in and just think, hey, I'm going to do this and get a really great paycheck, that can work for a little bit, but ultimately your performance suffers. When you align what you want to do with your values and your goals and what you want to see ultimately happen with the world, you're happier, you bring more of yourself to work, and I think through all of that, you bring out your best self to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. And I've consistently found that throughout my career, and I'm finding that now again, stepping into this role, I'm reinvigorated. I've got a lot that we're trying to do, a lot of great people behind me, a wonderful team, and I'm fully aligned with my value set, which feels very good.
A great note to end on. Ahmad, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great speaking with you.
Thank you, Diana, and best of luck to all the high school kids. It's great to meet you all.
Yes, so thank you to everyone for tuning in to the Wharton Career Chat. I hope you'll join us for our next conversation with the Wharton alum on July 29th at 3 p.m. Eastern. Bye, everyone.